Hello everyone, welcome back. And today's we've got another news and rumor video to discuss. And today's we're talking about some PTO updates, a couple of signings, and some trade rumors involving the Ducks, Penguins, Maple Leafs, and the New York Rangers. And we'll go to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Intent Hockey channel. Before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all your support. We're never with all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. And don't forget to comment down in the comment section below so you can also listen to this video. Now, like we said, lots of things to get to here today, lots of signings and PTO updates from our past couple of days, so get to all those here first. Only one signing. We have a handful of PTO updates, but only one signing. And the signing was an interesting one, and it was one that we've already talked about before, but it was a really interesting situation. So on July 1st, I think I mentioned this in my live video on July 1st, when we were talking about free agency, there was a lot of speculation that Toronto had signed Jani Hakanpää. I think it was like on a 2-year deal with AV of $1.5 million. So there was a lot of speculation that they had signed Jani Hakanpää, and then a couple of days later, or later that day or something, when they were announcing all their free agent signings, there was Tanev, there was Oil, but there was no Hakanpää. So there was a lot of people wondering, did they actually sign Hakanpää? And then there came out a week or two later that Hakanpää still had lingering injuries. I think it was with his knee or something like that, and that the Leafs weren't going to sign him because of his injuries. And then there was some speculation that they were still signing him. So there was a lot of speculation about if they were going to sign him or not going to sign him, or what sort of a deal would be with Hakanpää. Well, Hakanpää has officially signed now with the Toronto Maple Leafs, so that's officially gone now. So he did indeed sign. It wasn't for exactly the same term of money that originally it was, but he signed a 1-year deal with AV of $1.47 million to be with the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's a pretty good deal in my opinion for Hakanpää, coming off a season where he had 2 goals and 12 points in 64 games with Dallas. He's a really good third pair right shot defenseman, bigger type defenseman. I think he's like 6'6", 6'7", something like that. So he's a huge defenseman. He's really big. He's not going to put up a whole bunch of points, but he's going to be a really good physical third pair guy. So this is a really good pickup there for the Leafs, and it will affect them, which we'll get to in a minute with the trade rumors. But the only signing so far over the past couple of days has been Hakanpää signs a 1-year, $1.47 million deal to be with the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's a pretty good pickup there for Toronto. Next, going over to a couple of PTO updates. There's a lot of PTO updates to discuss here, so we'll get to all these here. First, the Nashville Predators have signed Cal O'Reilly to a PTO. O'Reilly's been mostly an AHLer over his career, so he gets an opportunity there with Nashville. Not sure if he'll get an NHL contract or not, but at least he goes to camp with Nashville on a PTO. Travis Dermott, former Maple Leaf, former Arizona Coyote, winds up going to training camp with a PTO with the Edmonton Oilers. So, the Oilers are looking for some defensive help right now. Not sure if Dermott will be the guy who they wind up eventually signing, but that could be a really good third pair addition there if they do wind up signing him, so that's a pretty good pickup there. There was a lot of talk about Pacioretty. We talked about this in a couple of videos ago. Pacioretty had some interest from a lot of people. The Leafs were one of the teams who had interest. He did go to the Leafs. He signs a PTO with Toronto, and there's been a lot of speculation from David Pagnotta and other sources saying that this is going to be a PTO, but at some point during training camp, Pacioretty will most likely get a 1-year deal around the $1 million mark to sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So it's not just a PTO. It sounds like it will be eventually a contract too, but he is going to training camp with the Toronto Maple Leafs on PTO, so that's a pretty good pickup there for the Leafs to get Pacioretty, who is going to be a solid middle 6 forward there. Then we saw Yamamoto, former Oiler, last year played with the Seattle Kraken. He signs a PTO with the Utah franchise. Like we talked about, I think they could have used one more forward to really sort of round out that team. Yamamoto's a really good player who could play on the 3rd or 4th line. I think he could be a really good fit there with the Utah franchise. So in my opinion, that could be a really good pickup there for the Utah franchise. So Yamamoto heads to Utah on a PTO. And then we saw Pierre Eduard Bellemare, former Kraken, former Avalanche. I think last year played with Tampa, if I'm correct. He signed a PTO with the Colorado Avalanche again. So he's going back to the Avalanche. We know the Avalanche don't have an overly great forward group, especially the bottom 6, without guys like Landeskog and Nichushkin right now in the lineup. So they could definitely use another lower end spare forward. I could definitely see Bellemare get like a cheap 1-year deal to play on like the 4th line to start the season. Then once Nichushkin and Landeskog get back, he could probably go and be placed on waivers. So I wouldn't be overly surprised if he got a contract extension, but we'll have to wait and see on that. Then we also saw the New York Rangers sign, I think, former Red Wing Madison Bowey. He's been mostly an AHLer. I don't think he's playing in NHL over the past couple of years. He signs a PTO with the New York Rangers, so he's a really good right shot defenseman, can play on like the 3rd pair, can be a sort of 7th defenseman, be a guy who can be called up. So that could be really a pickup there for the Rangers. Not sure if he'll get an extension, like an actual contract or not, but that could be really a pickup there for the Rangers. Then the Florida Panthers signed Matt Luff, former Nashville Predator. I think played last year in Detroit. He's more of an AHL player at this point in his career, can be a spare. He signs with the Florida Panthers on a PTO, so another PTO update there. there. Leff, I think, could be a really good pickup there for the Panthers to add some more depth to that forward group, so pretty good pickup there on the PTO side of things for the Florida Panthers. Kinkaid, who spent the past couple of years bouncing around the NHL. I think last year he was in Jersey or Carolina, I can't remember which one. He signs a PTO with the New York Islanders. That's a pretty good pickup there for the Islanders. They don't have the best of goaltending depths, and there has been some talk at some points this offseason that Sorokin might be dealing with something, so they may be trying to add some more goaltending depth for themselves. So adding Kinkaid on a PTO could be really good for the New York Islanders, so that's going to be an interesting pickup there for the Islanders. Then we saw the Anaheim Ducks lastly here sign 3 players to PTOs. They signed Pysyk, former Red Wing, former Buffalo Sabre. He signs on PTO. Gustav Lindstrom, who was with Anaheim last year, signs a PTO back with the Ducks. And Boris Katchouk, former Hawk, Bolts, last year played with the Senators. He signs a PTO with the Ducks. So not sure if any of these guys are going to get actual contracts. Lindstrom can be a solid 6th, 7th defenseman. Pysyk can be a solid 3rd pair defenseman. Boris Katchouk can be a decent bottom 6 forward if called upon. So I could see any of these guys get contracts. We wouldn't be surprised if none of them did too. So lots of interesting PTO updates from the past couple of days. Love to hear your guys' thoughts on which ones do you think were the most interesting. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. Now, we're going to start here with the Anaheim Ducks. Not too much here to talk about, not really any trade rumors, but we've talked about this. We just did our season preview series video for the Anaheim Ducks. They have not done overly well this offseason. Before the offseason, the Anaheim Ducks GM, Pat Verbeek, was talking about adding a top 4 defenseman, adding a top 6 forward, trying to improve and get better for the next couple of years. They didn't really do anything in free agency. They added Carson Mayer, Jansen Harkins, which are depth forwards. They made a couple of trades, helped Seattle out of their tight cap situation by adding Brian Dumoulin, added Robbie Fabry from Detroit. Weren't huge deals. Fabry can be a solid top 9 forward. Dumoulin a solid 3rd, 2nd pair defenseman. They're not the upgrades that they wanted, but they're decent players. But it's not for lack of trying. The Ducks really did try to get some improvements on this team. According to a couple of reports, I think I heard this just a couple days after free agency from Frank Saravalli, but also Elliot Friedman talked about this last week on a 32 Sauce podcast, and that is that the Anaheim Ducks did try really hard to get some of the bigger free agents in the free agent market this year. According to Elliot Friedman, he says that they did go hard after both Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault, and I think Frank Saravalli also said that they probably went after Chandler Stevenson too. So they said that they probably gave them a little bit more money, maybe even a little bit more term, but they weren't able to get them. So you can't say it's for lack of trying. The Ducks really did try this offseason to get better in their forward group, to try and improve that forward group, get some more top 6 help. They still have lots of cap space, so I could see where they would try and do something like that. But if you're the Marchessault, if you're Stamkos, if you're Stevenson, would you rather get maybe 1 million more on the AAV for this year, or like 5 to 6 million total over the course of the contract than you would have gotten in Nashville or Seattle, but had to be on the Ducks team? Like, if you look at the way that those teams did last year, Nashville's a playoff team and gave Vancouver a really hard run for their money. Seattle did miss the playoffs, but they're only 1 year removed from being a playoff team and winning a round. While Anaheim was 59 points last year. So if you're Stamkos, if you're Marchessault, Stevenson, who are going from cup contending teams year in, year out in Tampa and Vegas to other teams, would you rather go for teams who potentially could have a shot at going on deep playoff runs, like Nashville now does with the additions of Stamkos and Marchessault, like Stevenson in Seattle? Not sure if they're as good as Nashville, but I do think they're still a team who can contend for playoffs and maybe go on a deep playoff run. Or would you rather go in Anaheim, who's still going to be 2 to 3 years away from competing for a playoff spot? So I think the reason why the Ducks didn't get those players is because they have better options elsewhere, even if they were a little bit less money. But you can't say Ducks didn't try. They really did try to get some improvements. They just couldn't convince the UFAs to go to Anaheim. So interesting note there, but according to Frank Saravalli a while ago, according to Elliot Friedman last week, the Ducks did try to get better, did try to go after some of those big time UFAs. They just unfortunately weren't able to land them. So interesting note there. Going over to the New York Rangers. Now next, going over to the New York Rangers, Peter Baugh of The Athletic was recently talking about the Rangers and said that they basically really only have 2 options when it comes to Kakko. Now, we know Kakko's been a name who's been in a trade rumor mill this entire offseason. He signed a 1-year deal as an RFA. He's going to be an RFA again next year, but that was basically a stopgap option for the Rangers to try and figure out how he does this year. Like, last year was a pretty bad season for him. I think he's coming off a season where he only had like 18 points in like 45, 50 games or something like that. He didn't do overly well last year, while Lafreniere looked absolutely fantastic and a much major improvement last year playing with Panarin. So I think this is going to be an important season for Kakko. Now, Peter Baugh says that there are 2 options here for the New York Rangers when it comes to Kakko. One is that Kakko actually has a pretty good season next year. He shows that he can still be the sort of player that 2nd overall pick can be. Puts up like at the very least matches his career high of 40 points, if not a little bit more than that. And he shows that he can be a really good player, maybe put up 20 goals, be a solid player, and then the Rangers are probably going to have to keep him and sign him in the offseason to a little bit of an extension with a little bit of a higher AAV. So that could be really good for the New York Rangers if Kakko was able to turn out to be a really good player. But the other one is that if he's not doing overly well and he's still doing mediocre, and the Rangers want to try and upgrade their forward group at the trade deadline, and they're one piece away from trying to make a big acquisition, Kakko could be a guy who ends up being the difference maker in a trade. And he says that if they're not doing overly well with Kakko, Jarry might be able to pull that off to try and go after a really big piece that could really help that team. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly what sort of a season Kakko has. If Kakko's doing really well at trade deadline, I don't think he gets moved. But if he's doing mediocre to not overly great at the trade deadline, I think there's a very likely chance that we could see Kakko be dealt as a part of a big package to try and land the Rangers a really good player at the trade deadline. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But it sounds like, according to Peter Baugh, there's two options for the New York Rangers and Kakko, and that's either Kakko has a really good season, he remains New York, continues to be a really good player in their top 9, or he has a mediocre season, winds up getting dealt at the trade deadline. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. We're going to Pittsburgh Penguins. According to Dan Kingerski, he was talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins, talking about their goaltending situation. They have a lot of goaltending prospects right now. I think they said they have like 5 or 6 goaltenders and only a few nets that they can fill. So he's talking about the potentiality of a goaltending move by the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now he says that there's potential options here. One could be young prospect Joel Blomqvist, who's still in the AHL, actually putting up some pretty good numbers at this point in time. He could be a really good fit for a lot of teams who need a cheap backup. He's signed for this year plus next year at an $800,000 cap hit. It wouldn't be an overly big ask for a lot of teams to fit him under their cap. There are a couple of teams who could definitely use a goaltending upgrade. So Blomqvist might be able to be a really good pickup there. And with a younger guy who seems to be maybe the goalie of the future in Sergei Marusov, they may be open to moving a guy like Joel Blomqvist. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but he mentions Blomqvist as a cheap guy who a lot of teams could try and target, but he also mentions the fact that maybe they could try and move a guy like Tristan Jarry or Alex Nedeljkovic too. Nedeljkovic just signed a 2-year, $2.5 million AAV deal. Jarry, I think, is on the second year of a 5-year deal with AAV of like $5.75 million or something like that. So both these guys are on longer term deals. They recently just signed, but he says that if they have bad goaltending again this year, could one of those guys get moved? He mentions that Jarry is a very possible option, and a team that could be looking for him could be a team like the Vancouver Canucks. He says that the Canucks have connections to Pittsburgh, with Alvin and Rutherford being from Pittsburgh originally, so they could try and bring in Jarry. We know they have some concerns about Thatcher Demko. I don't think they will do it right now because Demko, A, seems to be doing a little bit better, and B, he's still under contract for the next couple of years. However, I do think if they do eventually wind up moving Demko and do want a sort of tandem goaltender for a guy like Artur Silovs, Jarry might be an option there. So I think that could be a possibility, maybe not now, but maybe sometime in the future. On top of that, he says that there's a possibility Connor Garland might be a guy who the Penguins have interest in. If I was a Canucks who would move Garland, he's a really good player right now for the Canucks, so it'll be interesting to note there. He says if Alex Nedeljkovic is on the block, teams like the Red Wings and Sabres could be interested. Sabres currently have James Reimer, who is a decent player, but I think Nedeljkovic might be a little more of a suitable backup for a guy like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen than a guy like James Reimer. So if that was to be a potential trade option, I could see the Sabres have some interest. And like we said, we know the Red Wings have a ton of goaltenders under their system right now. Probably want to move one. I don't think they're going to use all 3 of their goaltenders that they have in Talbot, Lyon, and Husso. But could they try and get a guy like Nedeljkovic who signed for the next couple of years? It's possible. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee. And they just signed Talbot, so he's not going anywhere. But could they move one of Husso or Lyon for a guy like Nedeljkovic and have Nedeljkovic be the backup or 1B for Detroit? It's possible. So I'm not going to say it's a guarantee that any of these guys get moved, but with the addition of Marushev, sound like coming over in the not too distant future, and with some of their really good goaltending prospects, it sounds like one of Blomqvist, Jarry, or Nedeljkovic will probably get moved. If not right now in training camp, then probably at some point either during the season or at some point next offseason. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but expect a goaltending move from Pittsburgh at some point over the next calendar year, so stay tuned for that. And lastly, going over to Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, as we just talked about, they signed Jani Hakanpää, which is really good for them. Solid third pair defenseman. I think he could be a really good fit there for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They also sound like they're going to be signing Pacioretty to like a 1-year deal with AV of like around $1 million. So once again, That's going to be a pretty good pickup there for the Leafs once they're able to get Pacioretty on a 1-year deal. So that's going to be a pretty good pickup there. But another thing that's going to be interesting is how the heck do they work out the cap? Now, they could make some paper transactions, have a smaller roster, wind up making that sort of a deal work, but there's a lot of speculation out there that the Leafs are going to have to make some sort of trades before the start of the season. At this current point in time, they're over the cap by around $1 million after the signing of Hakanpää, and that's not even including the fact that they haven't signed Pacioretty yet. So, in my opinion, the Leafs are going to have to make a move at some point. There's been a lot of speculation about players who could be moved. Timmins was making $1.1 million for 1 more season to one of them. Robertson, who just signed an $835,000 deal, that's another. A lot of people have been talking about him not being a likely candidate to still stay, and he still wants to be moved, so he could be moved. That's only $800,000. Another guy's Jarnkrok, who's got $2.1 million on his cap right now. Another guy would be Liljegren, who had a lot of speculation during the offseason as a potential trade chip. So the Leafs have options like Liljegren, Jarnkrok, Robertson, Timmins. They have options there for the Leafs to potentially move on from pieces, and I think they will have to, because I don't think they can go into the season with a 20-man roster or having to place all these players on waivers. I don't think it's possible for the Leafs. So I do think a trade or two will follow for the Leafs, and not just in the future, to try and free up some cap space. And I'd be looking at guys like Robertson, Jarnkrok, Liljegren, or Timmins as potential options as trade chips for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. So I'm going to talk for today. What did you think about the Toronto Maple Leafs? Do they make a move in the not distant future? And if so, could it be one of those 4 guys I mentioned? Do the Penguins move a goaltender at some point during the season or in the next year's offseason? And if so, could it be Jarry, Nedeljkovic, or Blomqvist? Which one do you think is the more likely one? Do you think that the Rangers will move Kakko at the trade deadline, or do you think he's most likely going to stay with the Rangers at this point in time? Do you agree with the Ducks to try and get Stamkos, Marchessault, potentially even Stevenson? And do you think that was the right move, even though they weren't able to get those guys? Plus, what do you think about the PTO updates that we've seen from over the past couple of days and the Jani Hakanpää signing? Definitely leave your thoughts on all that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm talking for today. Remember to like this video. If you like to subscribe down below. Thank you for all your support. We're able to help you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment down in the comment section below so I can also discuss today's video. As for the blog about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. Leave a link down in the description below. And I'm going to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.